Today we'll take up the synthesis of yoga. This is another book that Aurobindo had written, originally a series of essays in the Arya. Now, if the Life Divine, the book The Life Divine, as we said, is a synthesis of knowledge, and it is based on Aurobindo's experience, major realizations as we saw last time. But in this book, the synthesis of yoga is based on his tapasya. I hope you understand the difference. The Life Divine is based on his realizations which he had even before coming to Pondicherry. But the synthesis is purely based on his tapasya, which started in the Alipur jail a year before coming to Pondicherry. And then he continues the rigorous tapasya till 1914 and a little later. So these years of his great tapasya are the content of this book, the synthesis of yoga. Why do I call it the tapasya? You see, when he was in the Alipur jail, Swami Vivekananda, I think it means a lot. Swami Vivekananda had told him, had shown him the path. In fact, in one of his writings, he says, Aurobindo writes that Swamiji said, this is this, this is that, and so on. That is how he proceeded, by pointing and indicating. He visited me for 15 days in Alipur jail, and until I could grasp the whole thing, he went on teaching me and impress upon my mind the working of the higher consciousness, the truth consciousness in general, which leads to the supermind. He would not leave until he had put it all into my head. So imagine the relation between Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. I mean, historically, spiritual history, you will see later on if you happen to see research on Indian spirituality, there's a continuity of Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. There's a complete continuity of the work and the mission of bringing a new spiritual dawn in India. So it's very interesting that Swamiji had to give him the new steps, and that is what Sri Aurobindo practiced in the first 4 years at Pondicherry, and it was very rigorous tapasya. But unlike many other yogis, or I don't know if any yogi has done it at all, here is a person who really noted down in several notebooks all his experiments. In fact, he says, I've done testing it more scrupulously than any scientist, his theory or his method on the physical plane. So he's not one of those yogis or saints who just said, I have realized my Atman, I have realized my peace of mind. No. He really gives us the process. Almost every day, hour by hour, he notes down what has been his experience, the results, the failures. So he says, I was like a scientist. So this is what makes this record, these notebooks were subsequently published as the Record of Yoga, 2 volumes. And friends, if you are interested, you can have a look at it. But don't try to understand it. Because it is all given in terminology of India's ancient yoga. Most of us will not be able to understand that. He calls that as a Sapta Chatushtaya. And one by one he starts conquering, achieving, accomplishing each of those Chatushtaya. For us, we don't understand. But here was Sri Aurobindo, who said, let me share my path. So the synthesis of yoga is the path, whereas the Life Divine was the direction, was the philosophy, was the ideal. So these two go together, the Life Divine and the synthesis of yoga. So thanks to him that we have the synthesis of yoga, wherein he kind of, if I can use the word, transcribed his experiences on the path in a normal English rational language, so that we can understand a little bit of that. So this book, written during 1914 to 1920, has 4 parts to it. And the 4 parts are the yoga of works, the yoga of integral knowledge, the yoga of divine love, and the last one, the yoga of self-perfection. You can guess the first 3 books are almost the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And the last book is called the Yoga of Self-Perfection. Now that again gives us a hint that Integral Yoga should be called as the Yoga of Self-Perfection. Now why was it called Yoga of Self-Perfection? We'll see as we go along the way. However, these are the 4 main books. And in the 1930s, when he was asked to, we saw last time, when Sri started revising these books for the sake of publishing them as books, revising these essays, he revised thoroughly book 1, which was this Yoga of Works, and a little bit of yoga of second book, the Yoga of Integral Knowledge. But interestingly, the third one, the Yoga of Devotion, was not at all touched, and more so, the Yoga of Self-Perfection. Normally, we would have expected Sri Aurobindo would revise thoroughly his own section, because book 4, the Yoga of Self-Perfection, is his yoga, whereas the other 3 parts, as you know, they belong to the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. But very interestingly, we don't know why, but the mother also told him to go back to at least to Yoga of Self-Perfection and revise it, because mother found that he had not touched that book. In fact, in one of his letters, Sri Aurobindo himself writes that the synthesis of yoga was not meant to give a method for all to follow. Please mark each of the sentences. The synthesis of yoga was not meant to give a method for all to follow. Each side of the yoga was dealt with separately with all its possibilities, and an indication was given as to how they meet, so that one starting from knowledge could realize karma and bhakti also, and so each path. The last sentence is what I would like you to notice. It was intended, when the self-perfection was finished, to suggest a way in which all could be combined, but this was never written. The Sri Aurobindo himself says, I have not given you the last word of my yoga. Because the word is that when the self-perfection was finished, obviously in 1920s, his yoga of self-perfection was not finished. He was on the way. So he could not finish it. Could not finish it. In fact, when the mother requested him to revise, he said, but I would not like to go back to the mental level. So he refused to go back to the mental level of the synthesis of yoga, part 4. And this is why we see some incompletion. Unfortunately, the Life Divine was fully revised, but the synthesis of yoga, we can say, is incomplete. But what is interesting, when we read a little more beyond the synthesis of yoga and collected some material from the agenda and other writings of the mother and Sri Aurobindo, so what happened was, the Sri Aurobindo once told the mother that you will complete it when I have completed my yoga. See the connection. He tells the mother that you will complete the yoga of self-perfection, that's part 4, when I have completed my yoga. So obviously it was postponed for a time when Sri Aurobindo would have gone through the experience, because remember, he is not mentalizing anything. He is writing everything out of experience. So the yoga of self-perfection was not completed in 1920s. So he could not have completed the book. It's not a mental, foreseeing how it will be. No. Each word, as I said in the Life Divine, is a fact. So he told the mother, you will complete it. And again in mid-30s, some of you may know, he was writing the life Savitri. So Savitri was already giving him the experience of the yoga of self-perfection. So he didn't want to go back to the synthesis, whereas he said, let me complete whatever I can in Savitri. And now, as some of you may know, that even Savitri was not completed, especially the book of death. And obviously you know why. Because he had not yet gone through the experience of death. And what he did not experience, he would not write. So obviously the Savitri also remained incomplete. So the book of the synthesis of yoga remained incomplete even in Savitri. But there is a saving grace. After Savitri, some of you may know, the next project was the agenda, the mother's agenda. And the mother who really completes the book of self-perfection. Because it's she who goes through the entire process of physical transformation, which she has described in 17 volumes of the agenda. She even goes through the experience of death, which she again describes in 1962. So now we understand the history of the synthesis. That which was started in 1914 ended up in 1973. That with the completion of the mother's life. So this is the history. So let's not think that why Sri Aurobindo left it incomplete. Now we understand the why of it. Now, having given you the genesis of the book, let me take you through the contents of the book. As you must have guessed, book 1 is the book of works. Book 2, book of knowledge, integral knowledge. Book 3, book of divine love. Now, what does it mean, these 3 books? The Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. You see, in India, we have had so many different yogas, but what is the main idea behind that? Indian yogis found that yoga, as Sri Aurobindo notes, is an organized effort towards self-perfection. That's the definition of yoga. Yoga is an organized effort towards self-perfection. And so these yogis, now they wanted to see how human beings can be perfected. So each system took up one aspect of human being. Somebody took up the mind, somebody took up the body, somebody took up the emotions. So they perfected, like we say Karma Yoga, or what we say even the Hatha Yoga. They started perfecting the body, the physical. And then we have the Raja Yoga, which concentrated on the mental. Then we have the Jnana Yoga, which is the way of knowledge. And then we have the Bhakti Yoga, the way of devotion. And Karma Yoga, that is the way of works, which concentrated on the physical. So of this we have heard, and maybe next time when we come to the Bhagavad Gita, we'll talk about it more. But in this context, Sri Aurobindo gave adequate details of each of these yogas. Please remember that he did not just give you the general philosophy of Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. He went so much into the details that none of the books, including the Bhagavad Gita, has not given us so many details of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. But there's one thing you should remember. He's not giving us a research into what are these three yogas. He is interested in seeing how the best parts, not the rituals, not the external practices, nothing, but the internal practices, the philosophy, how it can be used for integral yoga. Please remember that. Let's not think the synthesis of yoga is a kind of a conglomeration of these three yogas and then he says these three put together is integral yoga. No, not at all. He has analyzed what are the secrets of each of this yoga which could be put to use for his own integral yoga. And therefore, he has given us the long descriptions, and you should see the book itself and see each detail of each yoga. Now the thing is, the question is often asked, if we have in India not only hundreds of yogas, but these three main yogas, apart from Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga, why did Sri Aurobindo add one more yoga? That is the thing that we should understand. You see, otherwise, in India, everybody knows about this Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. Where was the necessity that Sri Aurobindo should add his own integral yoga? Now, if you look at these yogas, they are good. They have helped humanity since hundreds and thousands of years. No doubt about that. But then all these yogas have got two drawbacks. Each of these. What are they? If you understand that, you will see the necessity of integral yoga. Otherwise, people will say, we have got too many yogas, not one more from Sri Aurobindo. One of them is, he says, excessive emphasis on one element or faculty alone. Excessive emphasis on one faculty. That means Hatha Yoga is emphasizing only on the body, forgetting that the human being is consisting of the mind and the emotions also. Same thing, Bhakti Yoga is full of devotion for the Lord, it's fine. But it's neglecting the emotions and the mind. Similarly, we have the Raja Yoga or the Karma Yoga. There is a completely neglecting the other parts of the body. That has been one of the weak points in India, that we have taken up exclusively to one path, rejecting, neglecting the other parts of the human being. That is why in Indian society, we have had a lopsided growth. You see, these yogis, those who took to this devotional aspect, Bhakti Yoga, they left the society. They were in the temples. They were always, in great contact with the divine. But they did not take care of the other parts. So Sri Aurobindo says, that way, a human being is incomplete. Now, there is a second defect in all this. Defect in the sense drawback is not a defect per se. But now, if we look back at these yogas, we see that not only individually you have excessive emphasis on one part of your body, of your being, but also you have, he says, there's been what he uses a beautiful word, he says, there's been a brain drain. Brain drain means, you have completely forgotten that there are other parts of the society whom you are supposed to help them or, help them to grow in any of the faculties or in any other functions. But you are interested in the temples, you are interested in the jnana, you are interested in karma. So these two, over a long period, over centuries, have actually weakened the Indian society. I do not deny that out of this Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, great many saints were born all over the country, right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, everywhere. It has given birth to so many saints, sages, heroes, warriors, jnanis, powerful yogis. But Sri Aurobindo, he said these are the drawbacks, and hence in the modern times, can we pursue any one of those yogas exclusively? He says no. It is not to our advantage. The present day modern society requires that we have a yoga that aims at realization here and not in some kind of a mukti or some kind of a liberation that comes after death. So Sri Aurobindo, first of all, he says, let us turn our gaze to one thing, to the total human being, physical, vital, mental, and of course the spiritual is there, and also to the full society, not to seek one's own salvation and liberation. So he said, we should have a kind of a synthetic yoga. Now you see the reason. For the first time, Sri Aurobindo brings in this idea of a synthetic yoga which takes the whole human being into consideration. Why should I develop only my emotion and devotion? Because when my body is craving for help, for being healthy, for doing exercises, for doing something. Similarly, why should I neglect my mind if I am full of devotion to the Lord? So this was one of the reasons that compelled Sri Aurobindo to begin a new yoga, first of all, which takes up this entire human being. That was the first reason. Some people suggested, can we not take up one yoga after another? So start with Bhakti Yoga, then Karma Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga. And you can imagine what it means. Do we have that much time in our individual life that we can realize in Bhakti Yoga the divine contact, and then Jnana Yoga? This only Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa could do that. Not all can do that. So Sri Aurobindo says, Sri Ramakrishna was an exception who tried out all the yogas in a single lifespan and realized in each path the divine supreme. So this was the rationale, the first rationale why Sri Aurobindo brought in the synthetic yoga, which takes into consideration the total being. Now the second thing. Secondly, what we see, he says, I do not want that liberation, salvation should be the sole aim of human life. But that's what each of these yogas have done. Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, they have all promoted the idea of this liberation, salvation, mukti. But then, this is called the ascent. Ascent means realizing the divine. In one part, in your heart level, the mental level, the physical level. But then that makes the whole life incomplete. Not only incomplete, as Sri Aurobindo would call it, it's purely individual. And at a point, even he calls it selfish. That if you want to seek in your life only your own salvation, it is almost an egocentric, selfish methodology or ideology. So he says, I do not want his yoga, he says, that it should not be only the ascent, but there should be the descent. That means bringing down of the power that the consciousness that you achieve should divinize life. Please remember this very important thing. Not an ascent alone, but you should be able to come down and help society, help the individual, and help humanity. So you can see the difference between all the old yogas, however great they are, but they are not giving us this aspect of the descent. And so Sri Aurobindo is radically aiming at a change, a transformation of the full body, of the full being of the human body. So body, mind and life must have some kind of a higher consciousness working on it. Otherwise, it says, there have been lakhs and lakhs of people perhaps who got salvation through Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. But then it says, humanity has remained the same. So here is a man who for the first time changes his vision to helping humanity in toto, not individuals. So that's the first thing. And then he says, for this attempt at transforming human life, we have had till now many yogis, saints, even avatars, who have brought to great power upon earth, great consciousness. But this global transformation of humanity, nobody could do. Even Lord Krishna or Sri Rama or any of the great avatars have given us great ethics, great morality, great spirituality, great realization, great consciousness. But unfortunately, they remained guidelines for the individual. They have given us a great society too, the social ideologies, like Lord Rama. But it has not been a totality of human change or human community or humanity. So Sri Aurobindo, from the hint that he got from Swami Vivekananda, that there should be a higher force, a higher consciousness, which has not yet manifested upon earth, that should be brought down to help humanity in totality. And that higher consciousness or higher force is called the supramental consciousness, of which only the Vedic rishis had seen and spoken of. But since the Vedic rishi is still present till now, no other person, no yogi, no avatar, no vibhuti has ever realized this. So Sri Aurobindo was given that mission, if I can say, thanks to Swamiji, who said, you follow this path and go to the supermind. And that supramental consciousness he brings down, which very clearly says is not for myself. I have not brought the supermind for myself, he writes in many a place. He says, I am bringing this new force only to help humanity. Help humanity in what? Is it to get you better food or better material comforts? No. Help humanity to grow into a greater consciousness. And this greater consciousness will give you greater liberation for total humanity. So it's with this ideal that he brought in supermind. And he says this is what is the difference. And of course, when this totality, this higher consciousness is required, then he says the path also must be so integral. So to repeat, individual versus collective. Sri Aurobindo is individual plus collective. Starting point is the individual, but ending is the collective. Secondly, to bring down a higher consciousness then that has been working upon earth, which is called the supramental. Then it says for giving this higher consciousness, for reaching this higher consciousness, we have to have an integral path. You cannot reach this higher consciousness only purely by Bhakti Yoga or Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, because the higher consciousness wants a perfection upon earth. That's why if you want to get the aim, Sri Aurobindo writes, a divine perfection of the human being is our aim. You see the words, simple words, a divine perfection of the human being is our aim. So the word perfection again comes into picture. And that perfection is the yoga of self-perfection. And that's how I'm linking up the last part of the synthesis of yoga is nothing but yoga of self-perfection. And the aim of Sri Aurobindo's yoga itself is a divine perfection. In some other parts he writes, a divine perfection in a divine body. Not just perfection in human life. He wants an immortal body itself. This is something that's again comparatively new. Because you cannot have perfection only in the mind and the emotions. You cannot be a great jnani and a great devotee and leave the body with all its infested disease and disasters. So he aims at a transformation, and a transformation that means gaining immortality of the body. Well, that's a thing perhaps many of you may not understand or even accept. But for that, we need to read more of Sri Aurobindo's letters, yoga, to see that how he conceives and why he conceives of an immortal body. We're coming to the last section. Now, this is the ideal, this is the difference. Now, what does it mean on the practical ground? Because most of you would say, how do you go about it? And we are interested in that. We, I mean, those of us who really want to do something with our life. Something higher, nobler, and if I can say the word, spiritual. Now, there are many hundreds and thousands of letters, books, and a small book called The Mother, which has given us all the signposts of the path. But there are two things that we have to remember on the practical level. The first thing is personal effort. We have to make a personal effort. Personal effort means what? That do you really want to change your life? Do you really want to aspire for a higher consciousness? It's not just once in a while saying, oh Lord, I want to be a better human being, and then rest of the hours, rest of the days and the weeks, you get back into a normal, comfortable life. This is what Sri Aurobindo would call in one word, aspiration. Are you really aspiring to be a spiritual human being, not a better human being? Please remember. Because the moment we say better, there are so many ethical, morality, religious concepts that come in. But here, aspiration to have a higher spiritual consciousness. So that is the first step. When we say personal effort, in fact, the word would be, as the mother also puts it, whenever you become aware of the soul and the mind and the heart of the divine possibility. You see, most of the people will not even accept that we can achieve something greater, spiritual. I'm living my mundane life. How can I leave my job? How can I leave my day-to-day affairs? No, not at all. It is in this, through this, I still would like to achieve something greater. So that is the first, what we say, awakening. Becoming aware that I too can. Why I say I too can? Remember, the philosophy is because the doer, the divine, is within each one of us. No one is here that's born upon earth without the divine element. So when the divine element is within each one of us, each one can do if he or she aspires for it. So the first thing is awaken in your mind, in your heart, that yes, I want to be, I want to become. Once that aspiration is born in you, then what is it we are supposed to do there? Second part is rejection. Second part of the same part of the personal effort is the first part. A is aspiration, B is rejection. Now, rejection is an ancient word. In ancient yoga, they used to call it purification. But here, in simpler words, rejection of all that belongs to the lower level, lower working, lower nature. What is it? Well, that each one of us knows. I don't have to enumerate them. Anything, emotions, language, thoughts, ego. And what is beautiful is, what belongs to the lower nature, we all know very well. Because the moment there is something of the lower nature, the darkness, there's something that really will pinch in you. Will say, hey, this is not right. But remember, before that, your aspiration must be there. It's only in the light of the aspiration that you can do the rejection. If there's no aspiration for spiritual thing, you may take rejection, your anger, your this thing, your jealousies. So fine, it's fine with me. I'm human. I can err. I can have these defects. You can defend yourself. You can justify yourself. But in the light of the aspiration, all these dark points will be seen very clearly. Your insincerity, your judgment, your bad behavior, bad language, everything. Because you have a light to reflect, which show you. So aspiration and rejection are like kind of the mirrors. That's why we are emphasizing there must be an aspiration. Then there's rejection. Now this is part 1 of spiritual life of integral yoga. That is personal effort. Let us not think that without this personal effort, things will be smooth and the divine grace will do everything. That the divine grace will transform me. You see, the divine grace can give you all the material comfort that you are praying for, you are asking for, you can bargain for. You can go to temples and ask the God to give you this and that. But for this transformation of human nature, you have to aspire. What are the practices? Some people may say, do I do meditation? Do I do this? There are ways and means, there are hundreds of them. Mother has spoken to many of them. You can take them whatever suits you. There's no particular way of doing, but the particular way is aspiration and rejection of all that belong to the lower nature. That is part 1. Now, second part is that the more important, I cannot say the more important, the more interesting part is to substitute this personal effort by the divine making him or her the sadhaka. You understand the difference? You have gone in your aspiration and your personal effort to a certain level. And then you say, Lord, O Mother, O Sriaurobindo, O Krishna, O Rama, whoever your God may be, please take me over. Because you see, this integral yoga is not a thing to be done by human individual. You have to prepare yourself. Personal effort is a kind of a preparation of yourself. You go to a point and then you have to invoke the divine Shakti saying, you take over. Because I cannot go beyond this point. Beyond this evolution of consciousness, I cannot proceed. So you give over your charge to the divine Shakti. I am using the word Shakti purposely. Because transformation of the being is done by Shakti aspect, not the Purusha aspect. So that is how in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and yoga, the mother comes into picture. Because the mother is the Shakti aspect. That's why in all his writings, he has told us about surrendering to the mother. Of course, the mother also says to surrender to Sri Aurobindo, but the dynamic, transformative force is the mother. So what do we see? Part 1 of this yoga is personal effort. Part 2 is all that you have prepared is to surrender to the mother. And the more you surrender, the more the oceanic spirit, the oceanic consciousness, help and power, they flow into your individual nature and then make your life outer and inner, the circumstantial and the inward. All these things become a kind of a beautiful flow into each other. Your disease, your harmony, your depression, your happiness, your wants, everything is taken care of. Remember, the divine doesn't do only sadhana saying, oh, I'll give you a greater consciousness. The divine will look after your outer prosperity also. In fact, saying that, I remember once the mother told me the same sentences. I had to take some decision. She said, I'm very happy with your decision. I'll take care of your inner and outer prosperity. And now I remember what it means. That means she takes care of both your outer prosperity and your inner progress. And that is what we call, the divine becoming the sadhak. So in this integral yoga, the most important thing is you don't do the sadhana yourself. You prepare yourself, you invoke the divine, and at a point when you are ready enough, the divine can and will take you over if only you let her do it. That's important, because in old yogas, you are all asked to do the yoga yourself, do the tapasya, do the meditation, do this asceticism, do these rituals, all yourself. And whatever little you got is your gain. But here, that yourself is gone or is going. Because the question of preparation itself means the lessening of the ego. The ego self. The lesser the ego self, the more the divine self. It's as simple as that. So making the divine your co-sadhak or the real sadhak means you are substituting your divinity, your ego with the divine. So you see, this path is so very wonderful and challenging. At the same time, I'll tell you what I would call as the Mahavakyas of this integral yoga. Just remember them. One of the most beautiful lines that Sri Aurobindo has given us to guide ourselves is, all life is yoga. You see, this sentence itself tells you the purpose and the raison d'etre of integral yoga. There's nothing that you are doing on this earth is beyond the possibilities of yoga. That sentence itself is so wholesome, integral, universal, I would say. That everything you breathe, you go work in the garden, you work in the office, you work as a prime minister, you work in the canals. All life is yoga. So it's not the bhakti yoga or hatha yoga or karma yoga, nothing. I mean, we read these sentences decades back, but it keeps coming back. If only we can put this all life is yoga into practice, it will be a wonderful thing. You have no tensions, you have no problems. Do I do this? People say, sir, in this yoga, should I do that? Should I not do that? Why? The divine is there in everything. If only you want to contact it. That is one mantra. There's another mantra, very simple, which comes very close to the Gita though. It says, remember me and offer. What more you can do? At every instant, drinking a glass of water, giving a talk like this, having a lovely samosa. Remember me and offer. I mean, I cannot think of a greater continuous yoga. There's no time, morning time or evening time or night time. At all times. Yoga at all times. A wonderful hint. And then he would say, of which I spoke to you already, make the divine the sadhak. Make the divine your sleeping partner. And you will see how the sleeping partner helps you in that. And then of course the aim, remember, divine realization and divine perfection, that's the big aim. But the mantras to be practiced are only two. All life is yoga. Remember me and offer. Make the divine your partner. I think I've given you. Well, you see, this is the book I wanted to show you, the Synthesis of Yoga, which is quite just next in size to the Life Divine. You see how thick it is? It's almost 918 pages. Maybe the Life Divine has crossed 1100. This is only 900. But this is incomplete. So to complete this book, we have to add the 17 volumes of agenda. Mother's agenda. So friends, this is the biggest book, not even the Life Divine. It goes on and on into Savitri. It goes on and on into the Mother's agenda. So if you have the patience, the perseverance, and if you really want a lifetime blessings, read it. I mean, especially book 1, part 1 is so heart-rending. It tells you exactly how the psychic being, how your Atman takes over, how your Atman helps you, what are the hindrances of your yoga. I wish I had read it in my youth. I always feel that I have missed the bus because I have not read it in my youth. In my youth, when I was reading the volumes of Sri Aurobindo in my higher course, I read almost all the works of Sri Aurobindo, but somehow there's a madness in me. The synthesis of yoga is very serious. I'll read it later in my life. But I was so stupid and foolish. I should have read that, the first one. Then only we could have walked on the path. Well, it's never too late, friends. We're all listening to that. But I'm charmed by Sri Aurobindo's books, his words. And every time, be it Life Divine, be it Synthesis. And next time, we're going to have a little talk on the essays on the Gita. Sri Aurobindo's essays on the Gita. And that, of course, was the most charming, because Sri Krishna is really close to your heart. He is close to my heart. And he was very close to Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So let us await for Sri Krishna in next Sunday. Thank you, friends. See you next time.